The CEPR's Competition RPN has a new chair, and that's Rod Sims, and a new director, Tommaso Valletti. I asked them what the RPN has achieved so far and what its plans are for the future. Hello, Rod, welcome.
Thanks, Tim.
And Tommaso, welcome as well.
Hello, Tim.
Now, Rod, first of all, I noticed that the next event for the RPN is really cool about what you've achieved so far. It's called Where Are We? What has the RPN achieved so far? So that's a good thing to start off. What do you think that Christina Cafara and Greg Crawford, who set this up, what have they managed to achieve?
I think what they've done, Tim, is change the debate about antitrust from an economic point of view. This is very much an economic point of view. Raising questions that antitrust needs to address, and I think that's really important. And personally, I'm just delighted to join Christina and Greg in taking all that forward.
The RPN, it is designed to be a global community of academics sitting alongside enforcers. But does this community, does it all think the same way about these problems? Does it speak with one voice yet?
Well, I don't think it does. That's the reason why we want to have this RPM doing what we are doing, in fact. I don't think even it should have a single voice, because diversity of opinion is actually great. But one of the starting points of this initiative has been the fact that there is a disconnect between the economics, which is being done in actual cases, in antitrust, in competition policy, sometimes in regulation, and the economics we do in academia. So basically, sometimes academics are not aware of the important policy questions which are out there, and these policymakers are not aware of the important research that many academics are actually doing. So we need to start to talk to each other first and understand exactly which ones are the pressing questions in the antitrust area. And also, as an academic economist, I came to realize through doing some policy work that the economics which is used in practice is, how can I put it, it's very unequivocally oriented in a certain direction only, which is typically the one of protecting the existing rents and the existing situation of market power. So a criticism which has come from academics, including myself, is that economics has been an instrument which has been used to direct policy in a certain direction, and there is a dissatisfaction with that.
Rod, you recently retired as the chair of the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, and Tommaso, you were formerly with the European Commission's DG for Competition. So from your experience at the sharp end, what aspects of competition policy do you think are problematic at the moment? Rod, you first.
Yeah, look, I think at a high level, Tim, I think we've lost sight of the fact that corporate strategy, which I worked in for 15 years, its objective is to reduce competition and increase barriers to entry. I mean, that's what any experienced corporate executive has been taught to do. It's just the way they think, it's the way they do. If they're not good at that, then they're not good at their job. And I think we lose sight of that. And in losing sight of that, I think we put too much weight on avoiding false negatives. You know, we're desperately worried we'll chill business innovation and behaviour. I mean, anybody who says that's never been inside a business, I mean, give me a break. You don't chill these people that easily. That's why they're there where they are. So I think also we're too focused on regulatory failure and not enough on market failure. I think we've got problems with the courts as well. They're almost looking for a smoking gun that says, I really want to, reduce competition, when actually they're just acting commercially. And if they get market power, of course they'll use it. So the objective of competition policy must be making sure they don't get market power in the first place. So, and I guess lastly, if I could, Tim, I think increasingly I find we're ruled by the exceptions, not the rules. So you read these beautiful economic pieces that say a 3-2 or even a 2-1. doesn't matter for some complicated economic reason. And of course, you can win Nobel Prizes for that because it's so counterintuitive. So the rule is that structure matters. Of course, that's basic economics. That's nothing else but economics, is that structure matters. And if you go from 3 to 2, then 95% of the time you've got a problem. You've got a competition problem. But we spend a lot of time dreaming up the 5%. And sometimes people think the 5% is normal, when in fact it's the complete exception to the normal rule. So there's more in there than I meant, Tim, but I think that's put all that together, and that's the problem we're facing. And it is damaging the world economy. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, that's quite a list. Tommaso, do you have something to add to it?
What Rod said is actually perfect. I will just add that the economics that has been developed in competition policy circle, and I said earlier, it's typically pro-incumbent, pro-merging parties. It's also coming from a certain way of doing economics, which is basically trying to, break everything down small chunks. So sort of solutionism. Where is the problem? We're going to fix it with a small solution, a small divestiture. But there is no framing, no attempt at framing a very acute political economic question, which is out there. So haven't markets become enough concentrated? Or is it okay for a $1 trillion company to buy another huge company? Are there implications not just on the standard consumer welfare, but also on workers, or aspects which we haven't considered before, such as privacy? But these are the themes that the RPN has already developed over time, and that's what we're trying to do. In a sense, I also want to defend very much my profession, not just because I want to have a job, but also because I believe that economics can be useful, but you cannot just, as somebody suggested, throw all economists at sea. Probably this person meant all consultant economists. But again, academics have to wake up and understand also the way we do our research, if we are interested in policy, has to be also digested by the policymakers in a way which is comprehensible to them. And we are just trying to say with these RPM economists, we should help. How can we help? Which ones are the pressing questions? Our models, are they helpful? Our empirical analysis, how can it lead to something which is actually actionable from an enforcement point of view? And the other question which we are reopening in a sense, we have abandoned in the past 40 years any structural presumption, so that market structure matters, by going on a case-by-case. But under limited resources, you cannot really have a case-by-case approach, because on the other side, you've got unlimited resources that this big company can throw into the discussion. And so it is about time to reintroduce some structural presumptions that we have lost, and economics has contributed massively at actually abandoning those presumptions, and it has not led us in a good direction.
Tim, if I could, I'm a passionate economist as well, and I worry that economics sometimes is narrowed down. Economics, if you think about its fundamental concepts, it really is the backbone of public policy. I really don't see how any public policy issue can get dealt with without economics. And yet in competition economics, more than in other forms of economics, we've narrowed it down. And so I'm just supporting what Tommaso has said in that compartmentalisation. And I think we just need to just broaden the thinking a bit. And again, that's a key thing the RPN can help contribute to.
Tommaso, I note that your paper on attention oligopoly won the 2022 Antitrust Writing Awards. I assume that there's very strong competition, open competition in that. What is this oligopoly, and how does it affect antitrust?
Thanks. So this is some research I did for academic purposes with Andrea Pratt, another economist at Columbia University. And if you want, this may be an example of the type of research that may turn up to be useful for policymakers. So to give a very simple example, it deals with market power and mergers of digital platforms, or the digital giants that we all know. But typically in policy, when there is a merger, they start with market definition, which is typically following a very functional approach. For instance, if Facebook, say, wanted to merge with Google, I mean, it's not going to happen, hopefully. But the analysis would be Facebook is a social network. Google is a search engine. These are different products. There is no problem there because these are disconnected markets. Instead, we are saying, hold on, it's too narrow to define markets in this way. These are platforms that can have access to all our behavior, our information. They learn about us individually, and then they can target us individually. So Google can read through my email, see my browsing behavior, see what I watch on YouTube, you name it, all the applications I download on Android and how I use them, the searches I conduct. And similarly, Facebook can see what I post, what I write, what I like on Instagram, when I use WhatsApp and all these things. So these are attention brokers, hence the title of the paper. They grab our attention, they learn about us, and then they can target us in ways which distinguishes them from traditional media. If I search, I need a plumber because my bathroom, there is a leakage. I mean, no one else can know that information. If I post to my friends on Facebook, oh, I got a toothache, I need a dentist, any recommendation? Again, they know the kind of things I know, and they know the kind of things I need. So what we do in this research is to link the information they get about us to the products which are going to be targeted at us. So to make an example, and on the type of changes that we are suggesting also enforcers to take when there are these kind of mergers, we are saying, you antitrust authorities typically looked at market shares, which are calculated in a very simplistic way. So Facebook and Google, once again, there is two users. One is Tommaso, one is Rod, 50 and 50%. These are the market shares. But for us, this is not meaningful. Is Rod only uses Google and Tommaso only uses Facebook. If there is a merger, nothing is going to happen because they are already monopolizing our attention. However, if Tommaso and Rod, prior to the merger, they were 50% on Google and 50% on Facebook, and then there is a merger, then the attention to each one of us individually is becoming monopolized. So the plumber, the dentist will not be able to contact us through independent platforms, but only from one. And ultimately, we show the conditions under which a merger between platforms can lead to further concentration into product markets, concentration into these niche markets such as the plumber, such as the dentist, because they need access to us, otherwise they wouldn't be able to exist. And ultimately, we end up paying higher prices from the plumber, higher prices for the dentist, and all this money that we pay is actually sucked up by the platform through the advertising prices that they can command. So I made it very complicated, but hopefully not. And it is a type of research which is actually trying to extend our typical approach into very pragmatic questions, and we can show that economics can be used by analyzing the right overlaps of us on digital platforms. We can devise metrics which can be used for digital markets.
Okay, well, sticking with the pragmatism here, you've already mentioned that, the job of executives when we're talking about sort of competition is to exercise their power. And I note this from a description of the RPN. It says that parties with skin in the game seek to shape the public debate by sponsoring research favourable to their point of view. Well, that goes to the issue of regulatory capture. How big an issue do you think this is? And I note also that the RPN asks their participants to declare interest. How important is that?
It's very important. There is some minimum standards that you might think are enforced, but they are not. So again, one of my personal discoveries was the lack of disclosure that you have in this endless circus of workshops, of debates, of things happening around Brussels or Washington, D.C. And there are lots of consultants, a few academics that never disclose. So we are starting for, as I said, from the very basics, very basic. Disclosure has to be meaningful. And so, for instance, in our RPM, we are saying you have to disclose the type of things you're working on currently in the past 3 years, because to say 10 years ago, I was working for some public enforcer and I've worked on both sides. That's not meaningful. That is diluting the message. So there's nothing wrong in working for companies, of course, but this is a minimum disclosure that has to happen. The other problem which exists, it's more difficult to solve, but again, we are trying to do our small bit with the RPN, is a problem of, collective action type of problem, in the sense that academia is not represented in this debate. There is a variety of views, but there is no one which is the representative of the university sector. We are individuals. We don't, as I said earlier, we don't know exactly the type of questions that enforcers are interested in. We don't have the resources to do that, because it's not that we get our work published by taking a joint position. So we need to organize ourselves. I think academia could play a massively important role in this debate, because academia has a set of standards which are of very high quality, but we need to get us engaged. We need to bring our views in front of the right people. And often courts and judges cannot distinguish between good quality academic research on the one hand, and on the other hand, some paper written by lobbyists and interest groups, which are constantly instead prepared in front of the courts, in front of the judges, in front of a journalist also to influence, and the politician to influence them. So two sets of problems. Disclosure is a minimum requirement that we have to enforce very strictly and in a meaningful way, And secondly, also trying to get the academics more involved and more, into the arena, and saying, these are the questions. What do we think? As Rod said, when it comes to policy, it's not the exception that matters. If I am 90% sure that something is going to happen, that's great for policy. Policy, by definition, is intervening under uncertainty. And so as academics, we are trained to find the counterexample. That's how we publish. We publish something that people haven't thought about, but that's not useful for policy. So it's going to be, I think, incredibly helpful if we keep doing our papers, we keep doing our research, but then now and then we stop and we say, okay, on the basis of our, literature that we have developed over the past many years, where do we stand vis-a-vis this problem that policymakers think it's important, this and this, and also we need to tell our own gatekeepers, our own editors of journals, etc., to say we should publish this with some, once a year we can do something like this, so that this gets to be published, gets to be known, and it becomes the received wisdom so far among academics. And this doesn't exist yet, and I hope the RPN can be a fundamental step into making this development.
Yes, Rod, until recently you were a regulator. How important is regulatory capture as a problem?
Oh, look, I think it's subtle, Tim. I think it's that if you spend your whole life working for one side, you are looking for those exceptions. You do look at things a particular way. I also think that often the economists and the lawyers come in quite late. They're not in the room when the real reason for the merger or the activity was discussed. They're in the room when, okay, we're being sued here, what do we do? Or we need to get the merger through, what do we do? And so I actually find, Tim, I've been really surprised when I came into the ACCC that I had extremely naive comments made by economists and lawyers about how the commercial community works. And I came from 15 to 17 years in private practice. That's not private practice, sorry, from working in the commercial area. I was advising companies on corporate strategy. That's what I did for a living for 15, 17 years. And I walked into the ACCC, into this competition world, and I walked into what seemed like another world. They're just not understanding the commercial world as I think they should. And again, that's where I think the RPN can play a role. This is policy and economists, yes, but also let's bring real world commercial understanding. I mean, let's go back to the 5 forces of Porter. Michael Porter, fantastic economist, worked for McKinsey. His article on the 5 forces, they don't quite teach it in that way, but that is what they're teaching. That is what people learn. He's an economist. We can learn off Porter as well.
Okay, so briefly for both of you, I'd like you to sum up by telling me what you think the RPN can achieve. Can it have a tangible influence on competition policy, and how's it going to do that? Tommaso, you go first.
Of course, I mean, it will have a big role, and it will make a big impact. That's why we're here. That's why the RPN exists. And so we will continue bringing together policymakers, academics, delving into the pressing questions and making sure that these two communities are listening to each other, understanding what research is being done, why it's not percolating down to the regulators. Is it because we need to change how we do it, or is it because we just need to have our own voice collectively more heard? But the logics is really that we will continue sharing our writing, our papers, our seminars, our webinars, and this will make a tremendous impact on the competition policy community.
And Rod, for you?
Oh, look, Tim, this is why I'm so excited to join Christina and Greg and Tommaso and others there's a range of wonderful people in the Competition Research Policy Network. I think through getting the right people in the room, that's going to matter a lot. I think sharing articles, comments, if we can generate more of that, that will be great as well. And also, Tim, I think the fundamental thing is you can often agree on the logic, although that needs to be debated. And I think the article Tommaso mentioned earlier is a good example of great logic and great insight. But sometimes it's also just the starting philosophical presumptions. The logic may be the same, but you're just starting in a different place. So I think questioning each other's logic, questioning philosophical positions, I think there's a fantastic journey ahead of us. Tim, won't be solved in one day, but the journey over the coming few years will, I think, make a great difference. And I'm really looking forward to working with Tommaso and Christina and Greg and everybody else involved.
Well, I'm sure we'll be looking out for how you get on. Good luck to both of you. Thank you for talking to me today.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim.
You can keep up with the RPN's events and output on the CEPR website or by following the link that's on screen now. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.